hasn't changed since I was 16. I'm still chasing.
Okay, welcome to this very special hot seat edition of the Hammer Factor. With my co-host out of town this week, I'm going to dig deep and peel the layers back from legendary expeditionist Erik Boomer. But before we get into that, Badfish SUP is the official paddleboard of Interior Secretary Ryan Zieke, IR co-founder and whitewater legend John Weld, and retired spandex-wearing Dennis Everywhere. Badfish was born in Salida, Colorado, when two paddling friends started trying to figure out how to build boards you could surf on river waves. Today, Badfish makes boards for all types of paddling, whether you want to run and surf rivers, surf and paddle in the ocean, or, like John Weld, just go for a mellow paddle in flat water contemplating your path to achieving Earl. For the month of July, we are offering free shipping to Hammer Factor listeners on any inflatable board. Just use the code WELDSUPS, all caps, WELDSUPS, all caps at checkout. This is free shipping to Hammer Factor listeners. Check out our 2018 lineup at www.badfishsup.com. Colorado Beatitude is attainable. You just need a Badfish board to get there. Thank you so much, Badfish SUP, and let's jump into Boomer's interview. All right, welcome to this in-depth hot seat interview with none other than the legendary Erik Boomer. So, Erik, we have you on the line here. Can you tell us where you hail from?
I hail from half-time in the Canadian Arctic and the other half of the time in Teton Valley, Idaho.
What are you doing with your headphones there, dude? You sounded so
Wait, is this conversation going to be like recorded?
Yeah, we're recording. You sounded so good a second ago. Why did you do that?
I always thought that when you put this under your lip, it makes it sound better. Is it horrible?
It's fine. We'll go with it. So where
you can't see face on this interview, right? It's just voice.
No, it's just voice. It's just voice.
Okay.
We're all good.
Perfect. I don't have to put on pants or anything.
No. Just don't scroll the camera down. So where are you at right now?
Right now I'm in White Salmon, Washington. Sarah, my girlfriend, and I are visiting town, and we're paddling and paragliding and kite surfing and just seeing everybody that we haven't seen for a while. Seems like the entire kayaking crew has moved to Hood River and the Columbia Gorge, White Salmon area, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's rad. Well, there's not a lot of better places to be, that's for sure. The Hammer Factor's very own John Weld is moving out there.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
So.
Bring it on. I bet he's going to love it.
No, he's super excited.
Definitely barbecue picnic city. A little bit hot right now, though. It's like 105 degrees. I almost died in the desert. I lost the launch and ended up having to hike through the desert with just a little water bottle back to the paragliding launch while Isaac and West Eustis and all the good paragliders landed in their backyards from 2 miles. I was dying in a desert.
Well, you're on a steep learning curve. All right, well, let's get into it. Where were you born, and how did you get into kayaking?
I was born in Grangeville, Idaho, at Mountain Syringa Hospital, 8 a.m. And I got into paddling because my dad was super into fishing and floating, so he was dabbling in whitewater rafting. And while we were doing that, we would see kayakers doing stern squirts, and some of his friends kayaked, and there was just no way my dad could keep me out of the boats. Anytime the paddlers pulled over, I was inspecting and sticking my head in and jumping in the boat to try it out. And it didn't take much of that to convince all these other kayakers to kind of take me under their wing and start sending me down rapids. And I think by the time I was 11, I found a kayak in the classifieds, and I told my dad, I saved up almost $300 of lawn mowing money, and so I bought a dancer at age 11 with lawn mowing money, and stole my parents' car every time they were out of town, and haven't stopped since. I still borrow their car sometimes.
Who would you say early on when I met you, you were hanging out with Tristan a good bit? When we first started to hang out and paddle together, you guys were kind of, before he had a family there in McCall. Would you consider him a mentor, or do you have any mentors in the sport?
I would for sure consider Tristan a mentor, and we kind of mentored each other because I feel like on one hand, Tristan had amazing skills in boat control. And so he was, I think he took like third or fourth in worlds and, was beating a lot of really good paddlers, older paddlers in slalom races. So Tristan had the skills and I had a lot of motivation, and so we kind of combined on those two sides. I'd bring the motivation and this drive, and Tristan would bring like a little bit more technique, and definitely taught me a little bit more about technique and reading and running hard rivers blind. And yeah, I definitely don't think I would have been doing stuff as hard as I was if had I not had Tristan. It would have been a little bit more huck and jumpy, but Tristan brought like that true whitewater kind of prowess that I was able to learn a little bit from. Still does, man. Even with all of his kids and time off, that guy still has a special touch for the water.
Yeah, dude, he's really good.
Man, and then like you and Teo, like I feel like I've had a lot of mentors along the way. But, living in White Salmon, Teo was, certainly a type of mentor. We were, just race laps down the Little White and Truss, and somehow I, connected with you, running into you at the Stikine there, and we got to do probably 4 or 5 really fun, kind of out of the box, non-standard trips.
Yeah, that was really cool. I'll never forget you guys showing up at the takeout, or us coming down to the takeout when you're down there and hearing about you guys like sleeping in the rocks there at V Drive and everything. I was just super impressed. I was like, oh man, this is super impressive.
Yeah, we were so fired up. I ran into Toby McDermott 2 days ago.
What?
Yeah, first Toby McDermott sighting I've had in like 15 years.
That's rad. Yeah, I think they're up in BC right now.
Yeah, I think they just headed out. But
so obviously you're a well-known expeditionary kayaker and really just in general explorer, like expeditionist. When did you start getting more drawn into that part of the sport, and like what pulled you that direction?
yeah, well, I guess as far as like expeditionary stuff, I think there's a little something to being from Idaho, with the Triple Crown and the Stikine and, harder runs like that. So I was always seeking them out. And, and at the time too, LVM, with De La Verne, you guys were setting the bar and driving the real exploration at that time. And so, I was pretty inspired just by what you guys were doing and what a lot of the older Idaho guys were doing. And I guess I didn't really know when the switch turned, or, when a kayaking trip turns into an expedition. I'm still a little bit baffled about that to this day, sort of. But then when it really turned the corner for me, and I feel like I went into a new realm, was when I started hanging out with my girlfriend, Sara. And she was like, oh yeah, I do expeditions. I just got off a short one, and I was like, oh, what? Like, how long was that? If I've done like 12 days on a river before, and she's like, oh, it's just short 45-day expedition. And hanging out with her definitely changed a little bit of my framework for what expeditions can be and how long you can be out camping, driving, on your own power.
That brings me to my next topic. So you've done some notable sea kayaking trips, in particular circumnavigating Ellesmere with John Turk. We'll get into that in a little more detail. Like you say, you've got into these dog sledding expeditions, kiting expeditions. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Twin Galaxies thing here in a little bit. What's the difference and similarities between that and, say, a trip to the Macatna or a trip to a normal whitewater expedition?
Man, they're really not that much different. I think the most important thing that sometimes we overlook as kayakers because we're just always paddling is just the preparation, though. You gotta be dialed on how far you can travel in that particular terrain. You got to be dialed on your food. You got to be dialed on logistics, map, safety. You just have, when you're away from the road and you can't just hike out in one day, you need to be prepared for anything. And yeah, it just seems like the groups that are more prepared have a lot more success than the groups that don't really plan it out. Um, yeah, I guess I feel like doing these longer trips, I've learned a little bit. Was a little lucky, I guess, just being Galliant and just charging into canyons. But man, just having a little bit more preparation and doing your due diligence beforehand definitely pays back.
Oh yeah. You touched on this or just a little bit, but you talked about kind of the groups and the team. Where does the team dynamic fit in to these expeditions? What's some of your experience with that?
Man, my experience with that is that the team is like literally everything. It's like the most important thing. And in some ways, in kayaking, you're a bunch of little individuals who operate as a team. But you're kind of making your own choices and whatnot. And the longer you're out there and the more you're working as a team on these longer trips, the more that it gets, because of that, it's tighter. So you've got this greater bond, but at the same time, everybody's little ticks or little bits of ego and stuff really definitely starts to come out. And all you can do is just be forgiving, with everyone else's little things and your own too. And just figure, it's like you come out of there more family than expedition partners because you just know people way better. The bond's greater, but that does, sometimes make the edge a little bit sharper too.
That's a really good way to put that.
Yeah.
Speaking of groups and trips, you did one of the ones that stands out to me is your circumnavigation of Ellesmere Island. Had that ever been done before? And tell me about that dynamic with you and John Turk.
Yeah, so that was my first really big long trip. I think I'd camped like 10 days on one trip before on like the Alsec, and I'd done a little bit of winter camping that winter with Sara, and I set out on a 104-day snow camping trip with a 70-year-old guy that I didn't know.
104 days?
That trip was epic. Yeah, 104 days in a tent with a 70-year-old guy that you had coffee with once.
Oh, man. All right, so do tell. Kind of lay that out. Give me some stories.
Yo, man. Well, like day one, we're like laying out stuff. Let's say we're at camp, like setting up and cooking dinner, and then I'm like, hey, John, like, do we have like a deck of cards we could play a game or something? And he just looked at me super stoically. I don't play games. That's all he said about that. Is like, Erik, I don't play games. And that was night one. I mean, the cool, man, some of the best things though is like John really enjoyed the grind. He loved like the suffering side of it. So I knew when things were hard, and I kind of have a bit of a masochist tone in myself as well. So I kind of enjoy the hard grinds, and you could always count on him for just like this real true smile that would just break through this suffering, and just you could tell the dude's really loving it. And we'd stop and talk about all these other potential plans and hard missions, and you could tell that the spirit of adventure was well alive in John Turk.
So now Ellesmere Island is it in the Arctic Circle, or it's right near the Arctic Circle?
It's above the Arctic Circle. So it's totally encompassed, and then like half of it moves into the true like polar circle, which is, I think it's above like 80 degrees. Or something, we're on the polar ice cap at times there.
So you're 104 days on this trip. It seems like that's really cutting into the summer season. Like, how did that play out? Was the weather starting to go bad, or how does it work up there? I've never been up there.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. It's all incredibly rapid. So we started in May 7th, and it was like totally winter. There's winter for us. For them, it's definitely springtime because you don't really have much sunset. So the sun's kind of always up and it's like slowly starting to warm up. And the sun's got a lot of heat, but it's still cold in the shade. And super quickly, little visit from Jay Gifford here.
Nice.
Hammer Factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
The patron of the Hammer Factor White Salmon office.
Hammer Factor.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But,
Thanks, Jay.
Man, things get really, really rapid that time of the year. So as the sun's coming out, it'll add like 15 minutes of more sunshine every single day. And so there's a point of rapid melting where everything just starts melting and going off, and it's a feedback loop that increases. And then the opposite starts to happen, and it starts slower, and then I think it's like August 15th, things start to rapidly freeze, like really quickly. I believe August, September is still the most ice-free time of the year, though, because it takes all of that time for that heat to kind of rebound and break everything up. So actually when it's freezing is also when it's the most ice-free.
So on that trip,
and so yeah, on that trip, I guess your question too is like what we were experiencing, and what we experienced, which was unique, was most trips will just move through the summer or through the fall or through the winter. And this one we went through 2 seasons. We started in the winter and went through this slush shit season that was literally like crawling through waist deep slush for 2 weeks. Wouldn't recommend it, but it's 2 weeks. It goes away and it gets better. And
that's so Eric Boomer,
yeah.
That statement.
It was good. Yeah, there was one day that the first day we really started crawling, it was just not supportable, and I couldn't even pick my legs out of the slush enough to move my knee back over because my legs were dragging. But I fell onto my forearms and realized, like, God, this is pretty efficient, just crawling with these arms. And I stopped to have a snack, and John crawled right over to me, and he's like, "This is amazing how fast you can move like this." It's like, yeah, John.
Oh God, dude. So what were you, besides the mucky mud? I mean, what were you dealing with to get this done? Is it just were you in the boat most of the time? Were you crawling most of the time?
Well, I would say for the first 700 miles, we were on skis or walking. Skis when it made sense, and walking when it made sense. Skiing is way more efficient, so we're just pulling the kayak, and at that point we're just trying to get 15 miles a day because we'd have like 50 days of food, and we need to get 15 times 50 days before we get to our next food cache. So it's like every day you have this goal that you got to hit. It's this Stairmaster goal, and if you don't hit it, you're going to be kind of hungry. And so, yeah, we hammered out that walking part, and then it shifted to where we were going to start to paddle. But the ice was super messed up because the winds blew it all into the shore. And so we expected to be paddling, and there'd be a chunk of ice that, like, hey, maybe we could ride that ice. It floats through this channel, and all of a sudden this baseball field sized piece of ice would just start to rock and then rip in half and stand straight up in the air, probably 30 feet. And, it's 20 feet thick, just getting lifted up and rolled and then just squashed and ground into the shore. And we were like, well, I guess we, shouldn't have been on that chunk of ice.
Oh, God, dude.
So we kind of had to sit and wait for a while, and we waited for days and days, and nothing was changing, and we were just watching ice move and break. And then we'd jump on a chunk, and we're moving fast south, and we thought we were going to just sail on this piece of ice through this channel, and we start to go to bed, and the wind starts blowing the other way, and it blew us 5 miles north into the ocean, backtracking. We were trying to go south through this channel, and it totally blew us out to sea the other way. And so as soon as it was spread out enough, we just paddled back to shore and had to carry all of our crap another mile or two down to the same point. And I think we were there 17 days at that point, just eating like half food rations.
So you're missing your 50 days at that point. You've pretty much understood.
Yeah, at that point we're like starting to talk about like, well, like do we eat all of our food and then like try to make it back to a military base or what? And John was like pretty early on started doing only half food, and I like didn't do it at that point. So it was like, shit, like, all right, got to start eating a little bit less. And I just started going for big walks and hunting rabbits. So I got like 10 big ass rabbits. So at that point,
so literally you're just out there with a rifle in full survival mode at this point. You're just
yeah. There's like a top secret military base about 30 miles away, and little do they know I'm walking around with a long rifle, hunting and surviving in their back zone. Yeah, every now and then I'd find some old like military gear and cars and stuff that they'd leave out there, but not much food.
Oh man, so tell me about the wildlife up there. I've never been exposed to it, but I know that there's some polar bear issues and
yeah, well, on the cute side there's these rabbits. That you got to Google these things. Seriously, the Ellesmere the Arctic hares of Ellesmere, they're the cutest things ever. They're super tall. They're like 1.5 feet tall, and they stand up like kind of like boxers and let their paws flip around. I'm serious. You gotta check these things out. They're the cutest. But we've got the bunnies. We've got foxes. We've got wolves that were in camp. Polar bears. We had probably 20 close encounters. They ripped our tent from the inside. And walruses, narwhal were surfacing with their unicorn tusks all around the boats as we were paddling through there. Lots of seals. All kinds of awesome animals. It's kind of like being on another planet, man, because those walruses are like aliens. It's kind of not real. These big alien blubber things with tusks, and they snort and stink.
So did you make it in your 104 days?
We did, yeah, just perfectly. And we literally pushed it so close that when we finished, John went into like kidney failure 2 days later.
Oh God.
And yeah, so we had to have him evac'd. It was all good, and his body just kind of like shut down and gave up. And luckily he made it to Ottawa in time, and I think he just needed more nutrients in his body or something, and he kicked right back on.
So you get off that expedition. You and Sara do some other things. Where do you guys base out of up there?
Iqaluit.
Iqaluit.
Which is it's the capital of Nunavut on Baffin Island, and a good jump-off point for a lot of trips.
And so then you guys are up there, and then this idea for this Twin Galaxies expedition comes up. I just got to back up and just, what were you thinking? Like, how did this idea come about? So explain to me the trip, the ins and outs of the trip, and what you were trying to accomplish.
Well, so like from the Ellesmere trip, I realized like, holy cow, man, we drug a kayak 750 miles, and it takes time, but compared to putting that thing on your shoulder and hiking over the Sierras, it's a pretty sweet way to travel. Like really, if you want to do distance and you've got time. So it was in my mind, it was like, God, man, screw hiking over the Sierras. I want to find an ice cap to go over and find the right river. So we actually got to do, just to back up one step, before Twin Galaxies, we got to do a trip on the Penny ice cap on Baffin Island in Sara's backyard, where we crossed an ice cap, pulling a kayak, and then went down between these huge, amazing mountains, Mount Thor and Mount Asgard.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and paddled this Weasel River, which was super sweet, and continued this traditional sea kayak trip where we like built our own kayaks on it for 65 days, blah, blah, blah. But it definitely proved the concept that it works to pull kayaks over glaciers, and then it puts you right to the source of a sweet river without having to hike up what you're going to go down. And, I like it because it makes a real clear point A to B on the map as well. So, yeah, we were hunting for something. We knew Greenland had a lot of options, and Stooksbury, I told him a lot about it. Like, man, you can travel so far. And he came up to learn how to kite ski in March and got his face a little bit frostbitten and got a nice little, a baptism by fire in the cold. And by the time he left, we did find by just pouring the edge of Greenland with Google Earth, this amazing blue, deep ice canyon feeding off of the ice cap that looked like it went into a good 10 miles of 3,000 feet dropping into the ocean. And it was just kind of clear at that point that, we've got a new route crossing the Greenland ice cap, which is a classic kind of polar achievement. And then not only that, we're going to join that right into a really good looking river, which, man, it looked good, but there were moments out there that we thought maybe we were just going to be walking to the ocean too. It was kind of touch and go there for a moment. But yeah, in general, that was the idea, though, was just to combine these two disciplines and these two trips to do like a classic long, hard polar kind of trip, and then throw in a little bit of adrenaline, extreme kayaking, if it all worked out.
And who all was on that trip?
That was Sara McNair Landry, my girlfriend, and Ben Stooksbury, my boyfriend. No, my friend. Who's the man at expedition kayaking and has been in probably more countries and done. I would say that Ben's probably been doing this stuff consistently for longer than anybody I know right now. He's definitely been on that forefront kind of edge for quite a while.
Yeah, we have we're going to interview Ben next week. I'm really excited about that. So, okay, awesome. Back to the crossing Greenland. So, I'm assuming a boat drops you off at one side, and you have all your stuff, and your plan is to use skis and kites to cross the ice cap?
Exactly, yeah. So, we could just ski it and just suffer for our 15 miles a day. I know how that goes. But yeah, on this particular trip, Sarah's been super into kiting and taught me how to kite. So this kiting is a new passion of mine, and this was my first kiting expedition where we got to use the kites to travel across the ice cap. And, we were pretty quickly making like 50-mile days with the kites, and it's just a lot funner. I mean, it's still hard. You're still standing there. You're still, just taking a lot of weight on your body, but it was sweet to get to kite, and sweet for me to spend that much time on a kite. This last season, I felt way more comfortable doing all kinds of stuff just because of that.
So there was an injury. Sara hurt her back on the trip. What went down there?
Yeah, so early on, like, we literally just hit the first point that we could get kites up, and we had the film crew that was going to be leaving, and they traveled with us for this first 10 days of slow climbing and just getting to where there'd be enough snow and it flattens out, and then the wind also is up there too. And so the first day we could kite, we were getting some shots so
forgive
they could leave.
Forgive me for interrupting. What kind of elevation gain is that? From
elevation gain, man, I think we were up at around like 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet.
Okay, so it's a big climb.
Yeah, it was pretty much 11 days of climbing, maybe 90 miles.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go on. I just wanted to get more of a visual on that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so 8-9 days of steady climbing, and the climbing was really crappy. It was a lot of up down, not, just a steady up would be nice, but we didn't really get that. So we're excited. We bust out the kites. We're getting some shots, and the wind just kind of started cranking up some, and Ben was having trouble putting down his kite, and it started looping. and he's just like dragging out of control downwind because he's still learning. So I'm like going over there trying to help him, but I'm on a huge kite and I can't really like put it down super well either. And so Sara was like, all right, I'll put mine down and I'm just going to pull this release, which is actually like a really responsible thing to do. It flags out the kite and it'll just go down, and then she could go help. But it was a bit of an older release, and so when she pulled it, it went out and snagged on something, and it went into full power and beyond what she could reach. So she was just like on full yard and couldn't touch it, and it just plucked her. And I think I just out of the corner of my eye, I saw her flying through the air, just going head, feet over head. And she must have landed on the back of her neck or head and cracked the sweet helmet on the snow, which must have taken a pretty good impact to do that. And she was unconscious and kind of came to pretty quickly and was shaken up, but still kind of mentally there. But yeah, as the soreness set in, she was pretty damn hurt. And there was a helicopter leaving the next day. So there was a lot of like talk and pressure to send her out on the helicopter, but she was just like, man, I want to see how I feel in 5 days. And if there wasn't a helicopter here, I wouldn't call one and I wouldn't want to go for a ride on one. So I want to wait and see how she feels. Turns out we realized after the trip that she'd actually broken her back, a 40% compression fracture of T8. So it wasn't even just like a broken vertebral process. It was like the whole body was crushed. And yeah, she stayed. It was. We were like, all right, let's take it 5 days and see how it feels. And so Ben and I took turns pulling her weight, and just there wasn't any wind anyway, so we just thought, let's advance and gain elevation and gain, because it gets you a better direction with the wind to sail anyway. And there were some days like day 3 or 4, I felt like it was getting worse, and it was like, in my mind was like, man, thinking of all the obstacles we're going to have to come, thinking of her maybe making it worse, seeing her in pain, I'm thinking like, man, maybe she should go. And so we kind of talked to her about it, and she just like looked at me so disappointed, just like, and I'm like, well, how do you guys do this in the past, And she's just like, we just help each other, like, and it was definitely like a moment that I think Ben and I like learned a little bit more of like the teamwork and the team aspect of these kind of trips, It's like in kayaking, somebody gets cold, like scared and wants to hike out. Sometimes that feels good because it pairs the group down to this like really tight group that can be efficient. But, in this case, you're all in it together, and what's going to change, other than taking things a little slower and helping each other out and having a better experience, that's the only thing that's going to change. And, maybe we had to slow down a bit for Sara, but for what we got back from her with like her experience and her, just her knowledge, and it's kind of like, being around somebody who's super comfortable and gnarly class 5, like they could just be like, no, this is fine. There's going to be a route and here's where it's at. And somebody who can just not be scared and kind of plot things out. Because Ben and I would have definitely just increased the suffering in a lot of places, and we would have been so grumpy and tired, and I would have been just like trying to charge and yeah. Anyway, it turned out to be super key to have Sara, and we learned a bunch, and it's just the key is being together as a team, and that's the same thing that we were doing in the Bighorns too. Is just being a team.
Wow. All I can say is wow. So essentially Sara had the most experience on the ice. That was her environment, the place she was at the most. That was her, kind of contribution to the group. And regardless of if she was hurt or not, she still kind of fulfilled that role.
Oh, big time. Yeah. She's a smooth operator. And yeah. And then there was like some days that it was I wish I could think of some really clear examples, but she was just mentally really, really strong. You know, at the end of long days, she was always like ready to keep going and be like, well, it's still windy, so, you know, of course we should make way more miles. And then there were some days we were just struggling hiking, and she's like, I'll continue walking with you guys, but like, we should just chill out. You know, like we're not, efficiency wise, we're not saving anything. And she was totally right.
Interesting. So speaking of Sara, she's got more into Class 5 kayaking and whatnot. So you've obviously been through a dynamic, and in her environment there on the ice, I'm sure that there's, how do you say it? There's a certain back and forth between you guys when you're in her environment. But when she's on the river and she maybe wants to step it up, what's different when that? Do you worry, or are you just like, go get him, baby? Or how's that work?
Yeah, well, you know, I definitely worry, you know, and I try to really watch close, but at the end, you know, try to treat her the same way she treats me and be like, hey, you know, here's where I think the issues are. Here's where, you know, what I think we could do. And otherwise, it's up to you. If you want it, you know, go get it. But the last month we were with Noria Newman in Noria's boot camp. And Sara was paddling really good. Noria was training her well, and we definitely came to a rapid on the Murtaugh section, Paradise, that, you know, I just grew up around there, and I remember looking at that hole at high water since I've been young, and it's just one of those things that stuck with me today. Like, that hole will just suck back from like 40, 50 yards. And so I'd kind of just planned that Sara and I would portage that, and freaking Noria's scouting it, and Sara jumps up to scout it with Sara, and next thing I know, Sara wants to run this Class 5 rapid. And yeah, I wasn't that stoked about it, just because mentally I'd already kind of decided we'd be walking it, but I'm happy to run the rapid with Sara if she wants to. But there was a big ferry to make, and then a fine line, and yeah, it had me nervous, but thanks, Noria, for pushing a little bit hard there. But yeah, it's new ground for sure, where there's real consequences, and I'm not in control of everything. But, you know, I have to just be reciprocal that I do the same, you know. And to bring it back to Twin Galaxies, a really key point that Sara did that for me was that last drop, that really nasty one, the King of Kong. We were there for almost 3 days, like the day we got there, and then we had to carry.
Is that big double drop?
Yeah, the big double drop.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. We had to carry all of our gear there, and then we had to carry gear below. So we were like looking at that thing for 3 days, and I knew I wanted to run it from the beginning, but it just didn't feel right until like the last day. I'd kind of healed up from the hits on the other drops, and I felt like as I went to bed, like, all right, tomorrow's going to be my day. And it snowed like 4 inches. And so I didn't think that we'd be able to move around safely because it's just this slick rock. And it ended up being really good, but I was super bummed, and Sara was just like, baby, you should just do it. Like, I can tell you want to do it so bad. You should do it. And on the other side of the tent is Ben, and Ben's just like, I can hear you two talking. He's like, quit whispering. I think it's a stupid idea, but shit, if you guys want to help, like, I'll do safety, but God, I can hear you guys. You don't have to whisper.
Oh, I can't wait to ask Ben about that when we get him on the show in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the Bighorns. So let me just kind of back up. I was following your guys' trip. Ben was making some posts. You made some posts. And it's just a place I knew nothing about as a kayaking destination. And it just was super intriguing. And that's kind of what prompted my call. What are the Bighorns? Where are they at? Tell me about them.
Man, the Bighorns are this funky mountain range in eastern Wyoming where, you know, you pass Jackson, you pass Cody, and you get into these big plains out past Yellowstone and the Beartooth Plateau. And eventually this range just rises right up, and it's not quite like a fin, but it's a pretty narrow, kind of tall mountain range, probably 30 miles wide. and maybe 100 miles long north to south, but it goes right up from like 3,500 feet elevation to about 10,000 feet. And there's this big old plateau up on top, and it's sacred to Native Americans that, there's this huge medicine wheel that's aligned with the stars and the solstice that people have been using, I guess, for 9,000 years, that they'd make that trip up into the high country. And, the first time that I've been in the Bighorns is actually kite skiing in the winter. Every winter I go there and we stay at a lodge and kite ski all over that area. So I'd been aware of it, and I knew, man, there's waterfalls out here. But leave it to Ben, and Ben, messages me, and something like 20 years ago, he'd ran a couple rivers in the area. And since he was living in Montana, he was more interested in rivers in Wyoming and whatnot. And he kind of prompted, this tongue and goose, which were kind of on my radar, but he definitely really believed in them. And we started doing that Google Earth work, and these were draining off the east side of the Bighorns. And one super interesting thing about them is, for the western mountain ranges, this one's way wetter on the east side, and it gets a lot of its weather from the Mississippi, I believe. But yeah, it's crazy the kind of relief and drop that these things have, but it's just a big enough basin that there's a lot of water to come off too. On the other side is the Shell River, which, it like, I look at it every time and I pull over and there's some slot canyons, but I'm not sure what the runnable whitewater to portaging would be on that one. And it appears to be kind of crappy, and that's what everybody says too, but I don't know. I still know it can be done, and you can set a few ropes at a few spots, and who knows, there might be more good whitewater in there than you think.
So what rivers did you guys run?
Ben and I went out on a scout trip early on, and we got shut down on a few that we wanted to do, but we did get on the Little Goose Creek, which was at a good flow when we were there. And that was about 7 miles of class 5+ mank, nonstop, super mank. We each got like pinned and had to get kind of like team extracted a few times on this one. There was no way around it.
You just had to drop in there and
yeah, pretty. If you're going to be on that river, you're going to get extracted. It was just too pinball-y and too small. But we did 2 days on that one, and we were able to scout out these next two bigger objectives, the Big Goose Creek and the Tongue. And scouting rivers is just a lot of work. You're just, we hiked like 15, 20 miles, and on each of those runs. And we just called it putting in the due diligence. Pretty much the main info we had was like, there's siphons and sieves, and we should, bring scuba gear and lots of rope. And, Ben had this roto hammer that he was really proud of, that I was really psyched to have him bring, so we could like roto hammer out of whatever box canyon we end up in. But from scouting it, we realized, man, I feel like we can move around in there. It didn't feel like we were going to be stuck, and we saw enough good things that it was like, this is worthy. Still, we didn't see everything, and we're still seeing it from a long ways away. So, as always, once you start to actually get into the whitewater, you're like, Jesus, this is a lot steeper than it looked from 2,000 or 3,000 feet up above. This is really steep. But yeah, we put in like a week of just like living in our cars, hiking around the woods there. And right after the North Fork event, we were just watching the flows, because we knew what we generally wanted in there. And we also knew we wanted one more person. And, I've done a little bit of paddling the past year with Noria, and I knew that she was going to be strong and firing. So we kind of pushed to have her, and she just jumped in the car with us, and she ended up being so good on the river, man. She was on fire, just charging and leading the way and motivating us. It was definitely key to have new. But the first one we did was Big Goose Creek, and that one, we kind of feel like it was similar to maybe like the Devil's Post Pile. The first big rapid is the Goosematic Falls, which is pretty rad.
I like that. Goosematic.
Yeah, Goosematic. It was a pretty proper like 15-foot air booth. Below that was the perfect 20-footer, which ended up probably being more like 45, 50 feet. And then, and it kind of just kept going. After that, it got good. We got into the Gooseable Gorge, where there was this mandatory sieve portage in the middle of an unportageable gorge, where we had to figure out how to climb around these boulders and seal launch off the backside. Yeah, the Goose like blew our minds. We got off of it thinking like, man, we've found a new classic. This place is insane. I was about ready to leave because my girlfriend was flying into the airport, and Ben convinced me to stay for the tongue, which I didn't see as many big drops on the tongue. And it was like, man, this is just going to be like, just hard white water, a little high the whole time. And turns out Ben talked me into staying, and that one had it kind of at all, like hard, big white water, not manky, big boofs, big holes, and big drops. And man, I feel like the portage to run ratio was really high. I think we definitely got out to portage a few sections, but man, not much at all, like way less than the box or anything like that.
Wow.
It did take us about a day to do each mile.
Just because it was so stacked. What kind of...
Yeah, if you want safety, like on every drop, there was some kind of bad place where you wanted to have somebody out of the boat for sure.
What kind of gradient were you looking at per mile?
So I mixed these up initially, but the Big Goose was 4,200 feet in like 6 miles pretty much of gradient. and then the tongue was, I think the tongue was 2,600 feet in 6 miles, but had about 400 CFS. And the way it channelized was like a good full 400 CFS. So it didn't, compared to the way that the Goose felt, that felt perfect flow for 4,200 feet. But this was like there was some holes and a lot of water boofs. Super good.
So do you think the Bighorns are going to be a spot? I mean, is there more work to be done there, or is it just...
I definitely think there's more work to be done there, and I'm definitely down to go back. I think that I'm sure some Wyoming guys will probably get out there, but like, it is hard. Like, you've got a little bit of bias after you run a run and you have no expectations and then it's good. So like, we're trying to kind of hold our thoughts and try to figure out where exactly this stands and where it fits into things. But in my opinion, like the Tongue would be a good river if you're a little bit bored on the box. If you're running the Clark's Fork box and you want some bigger drops and you want more challenge and to not know what's around the corner or how to get out of Deliberation Corner, then I would say the Tongue would probably be a next step for you there. But it's definitely dangerous and it's definitely steep. But having said that, it's my first time in there, and I know how these things go. If more beta and more people get in there, all of a sudden it doesn't have to be so hard, and things change.
You touched a little bit on the due diligence to get in there. It seems that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's a big trend to post the level you did the Little White, or I did a high water descent of this run, and it seems like there's less and less of kind of that work and going out and trying to find that new spot. Is that just becoming more obscure? Do you see this at all?
Boy, I guess I on my radar, I'm kind of looking for that kind of stuff. So I feel like that's what I try to see, and I do see, and I still see. Man, like that Scimitar expedition was super cool, and I really want to be part of that. But I feel like I'm still seeing it, but I guess the limelight and where a lot of the attention is right now, like you're saying, is on these classic runs in these classic, more level things. And I mean, it is pretty darn cool, some of the rapids that have been opened up on the classics now. You know, the fact like that the Untouchables and Scott's Drop, and like, man, you know, like I have to say I haven't run those, but a big part of me is like wants to go do some classic California to get a chance to run those. And even you've still
never been to California kayaking?
No, last time I went, you didn't show up.
Jesus Christ. There we go. No, I hear you. I mean, as far as expeditionary kayaking, you know, where do you think, what direction do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to go probing into these more obscure mountains and that kind of thing? Or is it going to be testing new rapids and testing higher water?
And I think a little bit of both of it. I feel like it kind of balances out. It's like, you know, when you have the opportunity to run things a little higher in some of these new rapids, I know, like, you know, speaking of a place that more people should be kayaking, like the Bighorns, is the Wind River Range, you know, Bull Lake Creek. Mm-hmm. You know, according to Ben, he'll probably tell you next week or whatever, but he thinks it's better than the Middle Kings. And there's some big drops on that haven't been run. You know, so it would be, you know, if people aren't running the Bull Lake Creek, it's hard to imagine a lot of people coming out and paddling in the Bighorns as well.
Right.
But, you know, I'm kind of fired up on it, though, and it actually, like, makes me stoked because if Wyoming was full of all the paddlers like California is, I'd just be complaining about all the people. So... you know, for me, it's kind of a win-win situation. It makes it a little bit easier to find some new runs and get off the beaten path. And, you know, until all these runs are crowded, you know, I'm happy. Yeah.
Of all the expeditions, whitewater, kiting, the whole 9 yards, what sticks out as the most fun? Like, maybe not, you know, maybe it's type, you know, whatever type of fun you want to call it, but what sticks out as just some of, like, you're like, man, that went great?
Man, well, I have to say that Twin Galaxies, like, was right on a pretty amazing line for, like, the adventure to working out ratio, where, like, we're right at the edge of just like, oh my God, this is terrible. We're going to be broken. We're not going to finish. We don't have a river. We're not prepared. But it all worked out. So in my mind, that's like kind of perfect when you know, just when you get scared and you can see a million other possibilities, but it still works out. But I'm just going to rephrase your question to something else and answer something completely different too. Probably the gnarliest expedition and the hardest, most physically demanding and dangerous one that I've done was dog sledding around Baffin Island with Sarah, my girlfriend, in the winter. That was a 4-month long trip. It was 120 days, and we averaged about a marathon a day, like 50 kilometers a day. And it was probably -70, -80 for like a couple weeks that we were moving through that. It was so gnarly.
When did you do that?
2015. And it's like, of all our trips, it's the one that's gotten the least media and the least attention. But dude, when you're in -70, -80 in the remote plateau, like charging into the storms, there's definitely a point where, like, man, if you're like 5 feet away, you're just like, you can't see somebody and you're gone. And, you know, you got like 30 seconds for your skin to be exposed. And that's the most violent and rugged environment that I've been able to travel through, for sure.
When you're out on something like that and you're so reliant on your dog team, is there like a special relation? I've always been interested in dog sledding and wanted to do it. Like, how does that relationship happen?
Yeah, you've always had big dogs too. You should definitely come hang out with us sometime, man. That's the best thing, is the dogs don't give a shit, man. You can be scared and it's storming, and you'll still see like this goofy dude. All their personalities really come out, each and every one of them. It's like a wrestling team or a football team of personalities that you're managing. And, you know, you'll be scared, and the big, like, goofy dude is still going to go piss on the cheerleader and like get her all icy and pissy, and then he's going to get in a fight with somebody else because they're like fighting over who gets to pee on his sister or something. And they're like full of love for people though, like they're definitely rough and tumble with each other, and kind of like humans who just do whatever they want. They don't really have like the social conscious to like control them, but they're pretty amazing and just full of love. They'll keep you warm, man. They'll cuddle up with you, and man, if you're freezing at night, you're good if you got a dog.
Dude, that is so rad, man. You are the man, Boomer. So you've had some gnarly ones. What's the lowest? What's the worst? What's the time? Give me the lowest of the low.
Oh man, we've been on a few low points. I would say there were some points on that dog sledding trip that were pretty low when we had to start like skiing in front of them we pretty much had to ski in front of the dogs 60 kilometers a day for 2 months at the end.
Why is that?
And because they were just getting tired and unmotivated. I mean, they hadn't really run 4,000 kilometers, around the island before. They didn't really know what they were getting into, They're just like, sweet, I'll follow you, So eventually they would stop leading the way, and we had to like be the lead dog because they loved us so much they would follow us, but they needed that extra motivation and that little carrot that was us to pet them to charge out in front. And I guess when I think about your question, when I think of all these trips and whatnot, there's definitely low, hard moments, but looking back at all of it, they're all like such positive, awesome experiences that if I gave you a low, it would probably honestly be like when you're getting off of one and you don't have like a next thing to do and you're just kind of trying to figure out what you're doing. For me, that would probably be like as low as it gets. I really like to have direction that I'm going, and those clear goals definitely make me stoked.
So there's the expedition, there's the team, there's actually putting it together, there's coming up with the plan, but then a big one is coming up with a way to fund the trip.
Yeah.
What are the challenges in that regard, and how have you found success there?
Man, well, kind of the formula that seemed to work for me, and I'd kind of recommend, everybody gets their own opportunities and their own formula, but it's pretty similar to the way we do all the kayaking stuff we did was just, you save up money and, you work a job where you can save and not spend all your money, live in your car, eat ramen noodle, whatever you got to do, and you start doing your personal trips, and you get, your resume and your network of people that you send stories to, and they're all examples, and it eventually starts to build and become something. But I can't think of anyone, that would want to fund or put money towards something that isn't proven or doesn't have a clear product that comes out of it. So first and foremost is just doing it on your own. And it also proves the concept that like you like what you're doing and you want to be doing it. Because if you don't like it, even if somebody pays for it, you're going to leave. Like it happens all the time on expeditions. People get all this funding and then they don't even really like what they're doing, so they leave. So just doing it and building up slow, and and the more we did it, the more we started writing grants, and we'd get a few grants here and there. And I feel like every time you get a grant, it's just like one more step towards getting that grant again or getting another grant. Starting out, you get gear sponsorship or discount sponsorship, and that's a great step. That's how it starts, and then you deliver it home with like great stories and great pictures, and over deliver on as many deliverables as you can. And now we're at a point where like the Greenland expedition, for example, when I first started planning, I planned the ultra budget, which would have been gnarlier, actually. My ultra budget trip was like, if we had to pay for it, we would have finished at the coast, and then we would have had an additional like 75-mile sea kayak to this community. And I was pretty into that idea. And then Eddie Bauer kind of stepped up and we wrote a grant to National Geographic Expedition Council, which came through really luckily. And, with the Nat Geo grants, I think we're at like 1 out of every 3 or so will get funded on average that Sara writes. And she's at a good place with them and she knows how to write the grants. But, it's those kind of things you have to try, like you can't just write one grant. You gotta write quite a few at sales. And try everything. And when in doubt, if you want it bad enough, just take a job for a couple months and pay for it. And it's probably going to be less work than getting it funded by sponsorship.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about your, and we didn't touch on this, but you're an incredible photographer. You've been published in all kinds of places. Where has that skill, how has that played into your ability to do these trips?
Man, yeah, that skill, sometimes I struggle a little bit bouncing back and forth. Like some years I'll be more of just a photographer and I'll go to these kayak races and just be watching people kayak and not paddling a bunch. And I really love getting creative. I love portraiture and taking photos, but man, then another year will come and I'll be a little bit more of a paddler and I'll be charging. I'll put the camera away and I'll be in front of it more. But yeah, these days I'm trying to balance out and do as much of both as I can. And I realize, I can get more artistic and focus on portraits and making shots happen. But for me, that feeds right into the paddling, and they feed into each other and they make both things more possible too. I'm able to get better pictures because I can get to different locations with climbing gear and paddling, and that's going to help me go paddling and climbing because I'm able to market what I'm doing and I'm able to show people pictures and tell stories. So at this point, I can't separate the two. But when I did start doing photography, my plan was like, I want to be able to just make all my money doing photography. But now that I'm at the place I'm at right now, I'm actually really glad that I'm still getting to be an athlete as much. And I know that cuts some of the jobs that I'm able to do and some of the drive that I have towards photography a little bit, but it also creates probably 80% of my opportunities. So I just kind of embrace it all and try to keep following my heart.
Badass. So what's next?
Oh man, well, we've been learning how to paraglide, so that's been a nice little adventure here in the gorge from all the kayakers here. There's no shortage of kayaker paragliders. But next, let's see, I think I might be going to Alaska with the Wells brothers. I'm kind of at a point where I hadn't been paddling for a few years, and then the past 2 years I've been paddling and ramping it up, so I'm feeling really strong and want to keep the momentum going and maybe do Nepal or do Alaska with the boys. And sometime this winter or the next winter, Sarah and I are probably going to do some kind of real long epic. And we're bouncing between a few, but there'll probably be some super long epic, like maybe on the north coast of Russia, like 11 time zones, 6-7 month kind of trip, or more multi-sport combining climbing and kayaking and polar travel.
So sick. I can't wait to see it. Well, we're over our hour mark, Boomer. That has flown by.
Oh, wow.
Now, to shut these shows down, we always do a rants and raves segment. So basically, anything that you want to rant about that's got under your skin, or anything that you want to rave about that you're super stoked on, we'll throw that down here for the closer. And I can lead us off if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what you got first.
Well, this is a little off topic. A lot of times my rants and raves have nothing to do with what we've actually been talking about, but I'm going to rave about the minivan. And I believe you've owned a minivan. Have you not?
Yeah, she just passed away actually last week. It died in the Bighorns, dude. I got towed all the way back from the Bighorns.
Dude, I know minivans have got this rap as, soccer mom, whatever. But, dude, it is the most functional vehicle ever. Dude, you can throw wood inside those things. You can take the seats out. You can put a bed in there. You can put all the chairs in there. I'm just going to rave about minivans.
God, man. Well, You took mine because I love minivans too. I think I might be trading in Antics for a Mitsubishi minivan here soon to get that. But God, I hear you, man. I love them. They're the best.
I mean, I see people with like big trucks and all this kind of thing, and I'm just like, man, you are really missing out.
Well, we got a big truck right now, that's for sure. The Ford Dually 350, the best to pull the tiny home.
Oh, that's right. Well, that's a little different. You can't quite pull the tiny home with the van.
So my rant and rave, I guess I'm going to steal it kind of from Noria. It was something that she said, and I saw it on the river with her, and it really inspired me to look at things a little bit differently. When I was paddling the pass, it was all about, trying to be the best paddler, to be the one who doesn't run anything, the one, who just is the best kayaker. And I guess one thing that I learned from her was, like, instead of trying to be the best kayaker, be the kayaker that everyone wants to be with and everyone wants to kayak with, by like making everyone else's experiences good. It doesn't matter how high you run the little wide or what drop you run. Ultimately, you want to be the dude that everybody wants, or gal that everybody wants to be on the river with, who's always positive, always there for a helping hand, doesn't leave your boat in the one spot where people need to get out. You've always got your throw bag. You've always got that positive edge. It's cliche and it's simple, but it is really true. It's not, it's important not to focus on those drops, but just who you are and what you do with the team.
That is a great rave. We're going to have to get Noria on the Hammer Factor here, get some insight from her in the near future.
Yeah, get her on.
Well, before we close this down, where can our listeners learn more about you? Are you through an Instagram page? Do you have a website? What's the best way for people to follow you?
Instagram is where I'm definitely the most active, and it's at eboomer, EBOOMER. I try to do as much Instagram as I can, and Facebook. Yeah, I kind of just do Messenger and a few things for mom and dad on there.
Well, thanks so much for the time, Erik. That was awesome. That was incredible.
Cool. Thank you, John. It was good to catch up and see you again, man.